Good evening, everybody. We're gonna go ahead and get started. So if you guys want to find a seat, great seeing everybody. How's everyone doing? Doing well? Well, welcome everybody to our February program. It's great to see everybody here. We're gearing up very soon to be hosting our first Native Plant Day in, believe it or not, 4 years. The last one that we had was in March of 2019. So that's the first and foremost, the first thing that I want to announce today in our evening announcements. Our upcoming Native Plant Day, mark your calendars if you haven't already. It's going to be a fun day filled with plenty of plants at our raffle tables and also for sale, plenty of presentations, nature walks, and a little bit of planting at the actual park. So definitely mark your calendars for that. We do need volunteers. There is a sign-up sheet, which I'll pass along momentarily. If you're willing and able to volunteer, we highly encourage you guys to sign up. We have several different roles, and we can work with you to assign a role that works best for you. And there will also be separate shifts. So you won't be, encumbered in a certain location the entire event. So if you're interested, just sign up on the sheet, and I'll get back to you with a bit more information. Of course, we have our biggest raffle table of the year at Native Plant Day, and if you have any plans to donate, those will be very much appreciated. If you can, just for planning purposes, if you can let us know beforehand what you intend to bring, you can email us at datefmps@gmail.com, and that will just help us kind of know how to orient things. Also, if you need help with them up and transporting them or keeping them for a while before the event, let us know and we can try coordinating with you as well. Something to look forward to for sure. We're very excited to finally be having this event after so long. Next week, on Tuesday, March 28th, we have our next monthly meeting. We will have the famous or infamous, depending on how you want to look at it, Roger Hammer giving a talk on Florida's endemic plants. Should be a very fascinating presentation, and I hope to see you all there. Just a bit of an early announcement for the Native Plant Society 42nd Annual Conference, which will be happening from April 28th through the 30th. Just like last year, this one's going to be also held virtually. So it's a bit easier to get to, not as much driving involved, unless you want to attend one of the field trips, which of course are in person. Those are held in different parts of the state, and there's different trips are occurring in different times of the month of May. There's more information as well as the registration link on fnps.org. It's a great place to learn a lot about the goings-on throughout the state, so not just here in South Florida, and also to network and meet other professionals and native plant enthusiasts. I would like to give a welcome to our new members. We have a few. Welcome Kristen Caravieco, Ann Haywood, Rebecca Peralta, and Michael Stark. Are any of those individuals here today? Welcome. And your name? Michael. Pleasure to meet you, Michael. Glad to have you. I'd also like to thank everybody who donated plants. Who donated plants today? Raise your hands. Thank you guys so much. There's a really cool assemblage of plants today, some really cool species, including some that aren't very often seen at the raffle table. So we very much appreciate your generosity in donating the plants. Just as Just as a reminder, if everyone can kindly either turn off or silence your cell phones, just so as we're going through the presentation, we don't have any disturbances. More information on all this and much more is included in the newsletter. If you're interested in receiving this month's newsletter, but you're not a member, you can feel free to leave your contacts. We should have a sheet of paper somewhere. Just write your name and email, and we can send you this month's newsletter if you're not a member. And then, as always, you can always check us out on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where we have most of the past presentations and available for use. Trying to figure out something that's happening with YouTube. If you go to just the main videos page, you're only going to see one video. You have to go to the live tab. For whatever, all our live streams are going to there, and that wasn't the case before. We're trying to see if we can try and get them to the videos tab, so it's all in one place. But they're there. You just have to go to the separate tab. So next, and I hope the folks joining us on YouTube can stand by patiently. We're going to take a moment to just kind of go over some of the raffle table plans. So Dr. Moas has kindly agreed to present some of them for us. Thank you.
So here, there are some Cuni seeds here. They should be depulped and maybe scarified on maybe a nail file or something before you plant them to get the best germination. This is Sorghastrum secundum. This is lopsided Indian grass. We don't see the grasses of the South Florida. It grows fairly tall with flower spikes. If y'all have never seen it in flower, it is spectacular because the flower spikes have on just one side the seeds, and the seeds have this golden color to them. If you've seen the sun hitting them either dawn or dusk, spectacular plant, beautiful plant for landscaping. These are tick seeds. These are Coreopsis. This says Leavenworthie. Leavenworth tick seed, very pretty plant for meadows and gardens. Very easy to propagate, self-seeds a lot. If you have like a little patch of ground and you have a few, they'll be propagating if you keep the area without a lot of ground cover and duff. Beautiful plant. This is Stenandrium dulcificum or dulce. This is called pinklet. And it is a small, you can barely see the purple flower here. It's a small flowered, very handsome colored plant of wet ground. It is moist ground, moist pine lands, and moist woodland. It was a couple of Chapelia. These are what can I tell you? These are the dandelions of South Florida. If you have little kids and you've seen them, they look just like the dandelions everywhere else in the country, and you can blow them, let them flower away. They have very inconspicuous flower. The flower is a little tiny white thing at the tip of this, and will give you some seeds that will float around. And if you bring them indoors, you'll regret it. And a skullcap, an endemic plant, considered, I think, threatened or endangered here. Scutellaria havanensis, beautiful flowers, forms them in sun, and very nice as a ground cover, as the patchy ground cover. It's beautiful, and it will withstand a lot of drought. They're pretty young. Have several yards wide. But it give it good good. Like stoppers, alternate leaves, relatively slow growing. Very useful for small, as a small tree. Let's look. about this seed. Okay, that's the clonal, as a clonal colony. It's a tough one to grow. Ground and will spread. A tree whose trunk is underground, the branches are sticking up. That's what this is. It will grow a yard, not a fast grower. This is blue pearl, the sun and such, but it is a beautiful flowering plant. You have see the blue purple flowers with little spots on the petals. Can get to be a largish size herb. Also will seed pretty sustainably in a garden. Nice plant to have. Yeah. Scorpion tail. There's 3 scorpions, I believe. They'll like fluorescence there with little tiny flowers, and believe it or not, there's some small butterflies that will feed on this, and they will come. You will see them, little blue touch and be. It's relative shade. It will tolerate relative shade. So if you have like a hammock environment and you have a lack of cover, understory, this is a good plant to have. And so is this one. This is rouge. Small shrub, more or less has seams of tiny red and intensely red. It was used in also very nice if you have a shady place. It will grow pretty well in the shade, unlike most. And plant, this is elderberry. And if you've ever seen the heads are sort of like flat. I don't know, it's flat cluster. Birds love. This is moist. Ground, it does not tolerate drought. Plant which is an aster. Aster will grow also in water. You'll see it in the Everglades and the big cypress. Think of the aster flowers of South Florida. Beautiful, maybe inch and a quarter wide flowers. In the autumn and winter here, they bloom like crazy, but they need wet. They need wet ground. But it will sort of like viney, not twine, but it will grow like a Tamiami Trail, you see off to the side these things that look like giant ferns, and this them they go 6, 8, 10 feet tall and very wide, and also standing water. This is Mimosa stridulosum. It will cover the ground, it will creep and you'll have flowers. This is Elliot's fan petal. One of the flowers just curled up for the day. It doesn't grow much bigger than this. This is a pineland plant, dryish conditions like sun, and nothing much to recommend it except that it's got pretty yellow flowers. This is clasping aster. This is probably one of the prettiest asters of the pinelands. And this one is flowering out of phase. But this one been in the South know what pokeweed is, right? Okay. This is a net. If you prepare it, otherwise it's toxic, but you have to right away. The reason it's brought, it is native. It will seed with it, but birds eaten up, and it's a nice wildlife attractor if you have a little space. This is a beautiful. Um, very nice. These are the Everglades in bloom. They like wet. They'll tolerate some dry. Don't grow much bigger than this. Much, much dense foliage, beautiful flowers. And this butterflies. This Xanthoxylum tagara. It's a hammock tree. It is one of the favorite food plants of the giant swallowtail. So if you have one of these, you'll see the giant swallowtails around sooner or later. It does have wicked little thorny spines. And cover a small tree, lanky, just leaves in like this. Have thorns when they get bigger, but this time of year, then we have somebody say it was a
Thank you very much, Dr. Mois. And we'll sell raffle tickets at the end of the event. Definitely go home with one of these really incredible special plants. All right, well, how about we get into the main event? So Lydia, while you get situated with this, allow me to introduce you. So most of you know Lydia, but just in case, Lydia spent a lot of time outdoors as a field biologist with Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden Conservation Team, where she works to map and monitor rare plants and insects of South Florida. She is secretary of DCFMPS and of the Miami Blue chapter of the North American Butterfly Association, with whom she also spends more time outdoors, attending or leading field trips and conducting butterfly surveys.
Thanks, thank you. There you go.
You can toggle with the,
Yes. Thanks, Ryan. All right, I'm super excited to be talking with you all tonight because I've been leading field trips now kind of consistently for Steve Woodmansey. He's been leading a lot of field trips and we rely on the preserve managers too. But so when I was asked to speak, this is the topic I chose because this is something that I've been doing for the chapter for the last 2 years. Let's see. Is it in the screen?
Yeah.
There you go, thanks. All right, I think I'll stick on this side. So first and foremost, there's a lot of people behind the field trip coordination. So it's Steve Woodmansey and Patty are the field trip committee, and I work with them with these field trips. And I have to thank everybody on here because they've been involved in some way, shape, or form, especially with the native plant field days that we did during the pandemic. So of course, got to thank the county preserve managers for, just acknowledging that we would be there, approving our visit, or being in the field with us too, of course, and leading field trips. The environmentally endangered lands program, as well as the Parks Department and City of Miami Parks has also had field trips. We've been there 3 times actually in the last 2 years to Simpson Park. And we also had a field trip at a Florida State Park, Bill Banks, Cape Florida. And this is the summary of what we did the last 2 years. So on the left is 2021, on the right is this past year, 2022. And with the dates with the asterisk are those that I'm going to be talking about and focusing on. But we have been busy. Every month we have a field trip going on in the chapter. And like I mentioned, during March, when we have our regular native plant day, so in lieu of that, in lieu of getting together in an indoor space during the pandemic, the society, the day chapter, switched to native plant field days. And that was, instead of one site on one day, instead we had 12 or 15 field trips during that native plant field day weekend. That's when we had a lot of members going out in the field. So I'm going to just go through a couple of these and a lot of interesting things that we saw while we were out there. And this presentation is going to draw upon a lot of pictures that were taken by other members too while on these field trips. In particular, one member, Joe MDO, which means Montes de Oca, Joe Montes de Oca, he created an iNaturalist project for the different insects and different plants, different things that we've seen on our field trips. And so they're organized to catch all those observations on that website for iNaturalist. It catches them for all the field trips that we've been on. So in August, we were at Florida City, or in January, we were in Cape Florida, and we posted observations on iNaturalist, and Joe set up this project to collect that information, that data. And iNaturalist is a really cool website. You can go on there and check out this project and see who has participated. We have seen altogether in our field trips, starting since 2019, Joe has put that data in there. And we have seen 471 species on our field trips, because it's collecting that information from the observation. So under that project of our field trips, it says we've seen 471 species of all different organisms, not just plants. And then iNaturalist also provides this table summary of how many different observations and how many people, the unique observers, how many people were posting observations, how many users, different users. So I'll start off with Florida City Pineland Preserve. We went there on August 15, 2021, and this was a really nice trip. It was almost didn't happen because there was another storm coming around that time. And so I think we were under threat of a tropical storm. It was really close. So it was a really rainy day, drizzly day, and really a lot of cloud cover. But people came out, even some from Broward chapter came out. And the preserve had recently burned. It was 5 months post-burn at that time. And so there was a lot of regrowth, of the plants, and different wildflowers were going on. And we also saw lots of caterpillars with all that fresh growth of the plants. So this is the aster AC slide. So these are just the aster species that were in bloom. We saw the climbing hemp vine, a ground cover vine, Mycania scandens, and we also saw black anthers, Melanthera parvifolia, which is a state threatened plant. It's also endemic. And we also saw the rosy camphor weed, which is a small herbaceous plant, the Pluchia baccharis. So these are the different aster species we saw. And maybe you all know why the name, the black anthers. It's because the inside is the anthers, or the pollen bearing parts inside the white flower, are actually black, and it's very contrasting. So a closer look at grasses, because when we were there, the grasses were regrowing and they were also flowering, and we got to look very closely at the details of the grasses. So the grasses here are flowering on the left. That's the Gulf Dune paspalum. And paspalums, the grasses, you can identify them when they're easier when they're flowering. And this one, you know it's a paspalum because all the seeds are on one side. So all the flowering parts are on one side, and the white feathery parts, those are the receptive female parts for the pollen, receptive to pollen. And here on the left, the receptive part on this grass, the Florida gamma grass, is the purple, that pinkish feathery spike. That's the receptor for the pollen on the Florida gamma grass, which is a globally imperiled grass. Actually, in the state, it's threatened. It has a listing of threatened. It's a crop relative. It's thought to be related to corn. The Tripsicum genus is a distant relative to the Zea corn genus. So this is the spurge slide, or the euphorbiaceae slide. And, you know, right after the burn, there's just a fresh ground cover of different plants, and some plants actually really grow their best right after the fire. And so there's big specimens of them. And so there's this plant, bastard copperleaf, that is usually a very small little plant in the rock. But after the fire, this one was really prolific with growth. It's the biggest plant of the bastard copperleaf that I've seen, because it was just so happy after the fire. And so it's a really, really tiny plant. And so that one there has so many spikes on it, and that's a closer look up there of the spike of the individual fruits. So the spurge family has 3 lobed capsules. That's one of the features of the spurge family. And you can see that capsule is kind of 3 lobed. It has 3 points to it. So the green capsule is not ripe, but if you look up, there's a darker colored one that is actually split, and you can see a little seed inside. It's just a small detail. And then something really, really cool that happened at Florida City was there was a new species that was found. A new plant was found to the preserve. After the burn, this plant popped up. It's called lobed croton, Astrea lobata. And it's actually very, very rare in South Florida. And it has a status of critically imperiled. And it was not known to the preserve before the fire. So it's something that really was a surge after the burn. I think the preserve had been a very long time without a fire, at least 15 years. So it's something that was possibly hiding in the seed bank. It was just not known to the preserve. And so after the fire, this was a ground cover in one area. There was a lot of different lobed croton plants. It was a mass germination. Here's some more of the things we saw at Florida City. The man in the ground flowers were all over. And the man in the ground is another very range restricted species. And so for that reason, it's globally imperiled and state endangered. And it has a unique relationship. It's the host plant for the yellow-banded wasp moth. And with all the fresh growth after the fire, we got to see these caterpillars when we were out there. They were feeding on the man in the ground vine. And with a surge too in more germination of different spurge species like painted leaf after the fire, these plants pop up profusely. There's a moth species that will feed on these different spurges when they're after the fire. There's so many of them. So we saw this yellow sphinx moth caterpillar a couple different times because there was so much of its host plant. And it really got to eat a lot because they were leaving all the plants bare with sticks, no leaves, just sticks. And then we saw this really interesting yellow moth, which is called the variable tropic moth. It might be, the species might not be right. It might be a new undescribed species is what I hear from Keys moths. Another field trip afterwards that I didn't get to go to, but other chapter members went, like Joe Monteseoca. This was a field trip to Campo Wasserbauer. It was led by Steve Woodmansey. And on this trip, from the iNaturalist information, we can see that we saw 80 different species from iNaturalist. It gives us that information. We saw 57 different plants, 1 bird species, 1 reptile, 1 spider, 12 insects, even 3 fungus that I'm going to get into a little bit. So these are some really cool pineland plants. The Bahama saxia is a plant that grows really close to the ground, right on the rock, and it's globally imperiled. We also saw the Gulf Gray, they also saw the Gulf Gray twig, which is pretty rare in Miami-Dade County. You don't see it very often. And they got to see the flowers. So that's a really nice picture of the flowers of this Schoppia schrieberi. Another thing that was blooming was the frostweed, Verbicina virginica, which normally you think is a coastal plant, but long ago we were kind of coastal, so it's a remnant of the coastal times. And this was in the pineland at Campo Wasserbauer, and it was blooming, and there was a lot of different insects that Joe Monteseoca got to photograph on this plant when it was blooming. So he got to see this wasp mimic soldier fly, which it turns out that it's very rare to see, or it hasn't been documented very much. So on iNaturalist, it says that there's just been 5 other observations of this fly. So it's something that we got to see on the field trip. There was also the scolded wasp, nectarine, umbrella paper wasp, thread waisted wasp, and also a flower beetle. There was just so many things that Joe captured visiting the frostweed. They also saw the Dina yellow, which is can be common at the Campo Wasserbauer because its host plant, the Mexican Alvaradoa, is common there, and it's a state imperiled butterfly. They also saw the webworm moth, which feeds on the paradise trees. So I just happened to know that because it came up on my plant. I had an infestation of the webworm moth, and that's how I remember the host plant. They got to see the adult. And there's a really interesting next observation. This plant is a smilax, a greenbrier, the Smilax havanensis, and it has a growth on it that is a gall and is being produced. They finally figured it out. This has been something that was submitted It was found by county biologists and they submitted it to the Smithsonian Institution to figure out this insect. And the paper finally has come out identifying the insect, and it's a really, really cool story. So they actually didn't just find one insect. They didn't find just one wasp. They found 2 other more. So they found in total 3 new wasps that are using this plant and the parasitoids. So the one wasp makes the gall, and these 2 other wasps are parasitoids on the first wasp. It's really fascinating. And so I put this paper there for you to, if you want to read more. It just came out. So those here at Campo Wasabauer, it's both pine rockland and hardwood hammock. And on the field trip, they went into the hammock, and this is fascinating, all this fungi that they got to see there. It's really cool. This is a wax cap with a red coloration. Also the Cocoloba chanterelle, which grows underneath the Cocoloba trees. There's also a cyanobacteria that they saw, the star jelly, and a bolete that doesn't have a species to it yet, no identification, but just really cool things that you can see growing in the hammock, the fungus decomposing the wood. These look really small, and Joe hasn't gotten an ID on them yet. So next we went to Bill Baggs in January of 2022, and it turned out that this was the coldest year of 2022 because nothing else beat it last year. So on January 30th, less than 10 people braved the cold. It was really cold. It was like 40 degrees. I was on the field trip, and we got to explore the dune at Bill Baggs, Cape Florida with Liz Golden, the park manager. The park biologist. And it was just a really great experience to go into the dune. Usually you cannot go into the dune unless you're with the park biologist. And it was very nice, no clouds in the sky, very crisp, and really cool to see all the plant growth. So this poison wood is just sprawling, but it's really being shaped by the wind. It's really short. And it's just being shaved off by the wind, and instead it's growing really broad. We also saw the coastal ragweed down here. It's forming a line. It's like a rhizomatous plant, so it helps to stabilize the dune in its growth. And it's actually a rare plant in South Florida. You just find it in the dune, and not every dune will have this plant. So it's a ragweed species, Ambrosia hispida, different than the one that grows in the pineland. And we also saw the beach star. Over here, it also grows rhizomatisly, so here's another line of them. And I included this picture because we also saw some footprints of some animals, like some rabbits and raccoons, and there's also a bird track in here. So the dune is habitat for the animals. Here's some other plants we saw. We saw the state endangered sea lavender in flower and with some small fruits developing. That one's in the borage family, Boraginaceae. So it's related to the strong bark species that we have in the pineland and also the hammock. And it's related to the scorpion tail. So they have flowers in a scorpioid sign inflorescence. Then we saw the evening primrose, which is another rare plant because it's just found in coastal dune environments, which are pretty rare and not many preserves. Yeah, it's not found in very many sites at all. So it was very interesting when I was putting together all the information. I noticed that the year before we had also gone to Key Biscayne. So in 2022, we went to Bill Baggs, Cape Florida, but the year prior, we had gone to Crandon Park. So this is the kind of things that they saw on that field trip in Crandon Park. It got cut off, but there was 84 species that were seen on that field trip. There was 15 birds and 3 mollusks, 11 insects, and 55 plants. And so this is just what I thought was interesting. Joe took this picture of another gull, and it's a midge. It's a type of fly that is laying the egg on this plant, which is the Barichia fructescens, is the sea oxidase. And here are the caterpillars that are growing in the gall. You got to take a picture of that too, really cool. So I thought I would show you the part of the gall. Then they saw these birds, the frigate bird and the short-tailed hawk, when they were out there. And this is a really, really interesting find for the day, the sea bean. And it's an Asiatic species. So it grows in the Pacific Islands, like Indonesia and Polynesia, the Barringtonia asiatica. So it's very interesting to figure out how the seed came to land on the shore of Key Biscayne of Crandon Park. And so they found it on the field trip, really, really interesting. They found on the field trip this sea bean of the Barringtonia asiatica, which is not small. It looks really sizable in Joe's hand there. And so another thing that they saw this rare plant, the Hercules club. It's related to the wild lime, but it's a more northern species, Xanthoxylum clava Hercules. They also saw this sand wasp it's a solitary wasp that burrows into the sand for its nest. And I wanted to include this highlight that the Xerces Society featured the sand wasp when I was preparing this presentation back in September last year. They had featured the sand wasp that month. So I thought I would throw it in there because they're actually very rare. Their range is limited to sandy areas and coastal sites. So this map is from iNaturalist, and you see the range is just coastal sandy dunes. So going past January, then in March, we had the native plant field days. This is just a list of all the different places that the chapter coordinated those 2 years to go to. And it was really a tremendous effort. And I wanted to put it out there, all the places that we visited for native plant field days in 2021 and 2022. So many places we visited both years, but some years we only went to once. So Tropical Audubon Society was just in 2021. And just in 2022, we went to Navy Wells. This is a list I just wanted to share there of the sites we went to. And also give a plug for the upcoming Native Plant Day, which is on the 25th. And it's going to be held at Elaine Gordon Enchanted Forest Park. And it's also the day chapter's 25th Native Plant Day. So it's on the 25th and it's the 25th Native Plant Day for the chapter. So it's going to be great. A lot of good presentations. So be sure to come.
Funny enough, 2020 was supposed to be the 25th, but
Yeah.
that's where it all went.
Yeah. So 2019 was the 24th, and the next one was
Yeah.
going to be.
Few years.
Yeah, we had Native Plant Field Day instead.
Yeah.
So there you go. Then moving past March, in April, during the first day of the National Park Week, there's free entrance to the national parks. And so we capitalized on that, and we led a field trip on that day. We went to Austin Hammock, which is a very large hammock, about 96 acres hammock in Long Pine Key. So we were walking in the Long Pine Key Trail to get to the hammock. And there's the group there. And here are some of the plants, very interesting plants that we saw that day. At least ones that I had really nice pictures to show. This is spurge species, so Euphorbiaceae again, and The pineland sandmat and the Euphorbia deltoidea species complex is fascinating. Many of you might know about this, that in the Rock Ridge, we have a deltoid, we have a spurge complex of these plants that grow right on the rock. And they're only found in the Miami Rock Ridge. And so this subspecies Pinetorum is one that's found more south, like in the Homestead area and in Long Pine Key. And there's other subspecies, one that grows in Big Pine Key, for example, and another one that will grow more north, like in Kendall. So different subspecies depending on where you are on the Miami Rock Ridge, really fascinating. So, but since we were in Long Pine Key, we had the Pinetorum subspecies. And this is a close-up of those flowers, which it's an inflorescence. So it has the different male and female parts assembled in such a way. And this right here is a nectary, actually, for different insects to be attracted to visit. Really nice picture. And this is another spurge species, not endemic. It's actually found in the West Indies as well, but it's state threatened and it's considered imperiled because of how rare that it is around. And it's very different. So this one you see it has hairs growing on it, but this one is very glabrous, no hairs on it. And this is the Rockland spurge, Euphorbia pergamena. Different flowers. These are white bracts. So that was around in the Pineland area of Long Pine Key. And when we got into the hammock, this is the kind of things that we saw. There was a really nice solution hole area with water. So this was holding water in the dry season of April. So the rainy season hadn't started yet, but this still had a lot of water in it. And we saw Florida tree snail this color when we were there. And this is a globally vulnerable species. It has a very limited range. When we were in there, we also saw this plant is called parasitic ghost plant. It's in the Gentiaceae family, the gentian family. It's a parasitic plant that it gets its nutrients from fungus. Actually, that's what they determined. So it parasitizes fungus for its nutrients, pretty much. It's state endangered and it's considered rare. You don't really get to see it. You only see it when it's flowering in the spring, like this. Otherwise, you cannot see the species. We're not sure that it has leaves. You know, it's a lot of underground and not above ground. Here's some other things we saw that day. Since it was April, the locust berries were in bloom, and we got to see the Florida locust berry oil collecting bee, which is a bee that's endemic to Florida, I believe. So being just found in Florida, it's globally vulnerable. We also saw this really, really interesting. Joe took this picture of the Florida graphic moth. That's the common name I gave it. But this is like a newly described species. It's really, really cool. I think it has some observations on iNaturalist, but it was something that it was not, it was like a cryptic species. It looked like another moth. And so they finally just separated it, described it, and it's endemic to our area, to extreme South Florida, like Key Largo and Collier County. That's that Everglades area. So really, really cool. Melipotis Florida, the Florida graphic moth. And then Joe photographed this blue lady beetle, and I said, okay, I'm gonna put that in. Then I realized it's not native, so I really learned something. And I wanted to show it to you guys too. It's very interesting. We saw this not native beetle in Everglades National Park in the hammock, I guess, in the detritus, something like that. Very cool. Very nice. So moving on from April to May, we went to County Line Scrub next. And this is the field trip picture of that day. There's Steve Woodmansey. He led the field trip that day. And let's see, this time there was 150 species that were seen on this field trip on iNaturalist. There was 3 birds, 3 mollusks, 6 spiders, 41 insects, 93 plants, and 3 fungi. This, and while we were out there, it was like a complete survey. I mean, the chapter members, we all have a really great time just being out there in the preserve and just seeing what there is growing there. And there was a lot of new plants that were found to the preserve, so they actually contributed to the preserve species list doing this. And this is one really cool find. These are both new plants to the preserve. So the sleepy morning, however common that it wasn't on the list somehow. So we photographed that. That's a voucher for the plant being there. And also this very interesting oak came out from all the photos and from all the plants just out there. There's in the scrub, you can find multiple species of oaks. There's the Chapman's oak, the myrtle oak. There's a hybrid between the two called the Rolfe CI, and it occurs in this preserve. But this is another one that came up from this, and you identify it from being so glabrous. So usually the oaks have a lot of scales, they have a lot of pubescence on the stem, but this one is identified because it's so glabrous. So it's the Quercus hemispherica, and just really, really interesting that it came out too that this species is in the preserve now. So this is one that this species is getting lumped sometimes with the laurel oak, laurifolia. But it got separated because of how glabrous it is. And it's really glabrous. There's no scales or pubescence on it. That's how they were able to determine the ID. So this is really, really exciting to get new data for the preserves. This is some of the insects that they saw. This is cool. This bee wolf is a type of wasp, and it hasn't been observed very much, only 6 observations on iNaturalist for the county. So really nice. It was observed in county line scrub. There's a caterpillar in this middle picture. It's camouflaged pretty well, but it's a moth caterpillar of the emerald moth. So it's a type of geometrid. Okay. And then on the right, this really colorful beetle, a hispine beetle. It's apparently native, but it's a tropical species. So it's it has other populations in South America, but they say it's native. Very colorful, bright red. Next, we went to Reynolds Park. This was a field trip that Brian led. Here we are on the left, that's Brian on the trail. And this preserve is really nice because North Miami Beach is actually pretty busy. It's right off US 1, this area, and a lot of major streets. And so this place is actually really hectic, but when you're in the preserve, you'd never know because it's really, well, there is the golf course there. It's a really busy park, but the natural area, you can just it can be serene. And we saw these ibis that thought it was safe to be around there. So it is really quiet. Took a picture of them, and then here is a photo from the top of the what do they call it? It's just an elevated, the mound. It is a mound. I think that there was trash under there that they kind of covered up. And this is a nice plaque. This is from 1935. It's when the park has been owned by the Dade County. Yeah, that's a mound of that's been covered.
It was the heavy machinery from when that park was a rock quarry. So they just piled it up and then put limestone rocks around and then left it there.
From when it was a quarry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so more recently, after June, we didn't have any field trips in July, but then Nixon Smiley came on our radar really quickly because it had burned that year, like 3 months before. So when we visited, it was at 3 months post-burn. There was a lot of interesting plants and insects when we went. We recorded 90 species, 66 plants, 22 insects, and 2 arachnids, 2 spiders. These are the plants that we saw. These are really rare plants. These are the ones I wanted to highlight, show. The Florida false beard grass is a critically imperiled in South Florida, has very few populations. And this is a picture of just the green leaf blades, but when it's flowering, the fruits, the seeds are actually really interesting. They're like daggers. They're like these points. They're these seeds with a very sharp point, long, like awns. And that's how they disperse, because they'll latch on to something furry and be carried on. And this grass was really popping up after the burn, and it has popped up in other preserves after burns. So it's something really interesting that shows a relationship from burning, the prescribed burns or burning in general, and plant response. We also saw the Florida bricklebush. The population at Nixon Smiley, it was almost unknown for some time. It was completely there where it was, but now we know exactly, and that's important for its conservation. And so we saw it on the field trip. It's a plant that only occurs here in Miami-Dade County, and it's federally endangered. It's in the aster family. So this other plant, after the burn, another spurge, they seem to really pop up after the burn, Acalypha astrifolia. And I honestly hadn't seen it before. I don't think I'd seen it before until we visited that day. Pretty rare. I think the distribution is really spotty. It's not a common plant at all. Some more things while we were there. The metastelma was a blooming already after 3 months. That's just amazing that it got to flower that quickly after the burn. And that's a plant that is globally critically imperiled. It has a really narrow range. It's just found here in Miami-Dade County in the Keys and in the Bahamas, in the whole world. That's why it's globally critically imperiled, and it's also state listed. And we also saw the pine hyacinth, which responds very quickly after the burn too. Flowering, and it was already seeding after 3 months. Just 3 months after the burn, it was already producing seeds. And that shows how these plants have that opportunity to set seed so quickly, and that's how they really get a foothold. And there's so much diversity in the pineland after the burn. Now the insects, there was some really interesting things going on. They found this ox beetle that maybe didn't survive the fire. This pretty big beetle, looks like it's 2 inches long. And then this other observation of a fly that was apparently impaled by a sand spur, which is a type of grass. The burrs that stick to your pants, your clothing, your shoes, your socks, everything. Apparently the fly was a victim of that. And this is not Joe, this is not the first time you've seen it. So this is how they disperse the seeds. They latch on to fur, but apparently this fly was a victim. It got too close. It got too close too fast. There was so many butterflies that we saw on that field trip, but I just included the variegated fritillary because it's one of the less common ones. So you usually see it more south. You usually see it in Homestead, but this one we saw it at Nixon Smiley more north. We also saw this banded thinned wasp that lives in the New World. It's a very long common name. And it was visiting the Croton glandulosus, which is a spurge species. And I included it because if you look really closely at the wasp, it has all the pollen grains of the Croton on it. So it's a really, really nice picture by Joe of the insect, the wasp using the flower and how it's collecting the pollen and possibly even the process of pollination when it's visiting another flower. So it's really small white pollen grains. Okay. And so when we visited in August, the timing just wasn't right. So the liatris was all over, but it was not blooming yet. So we decided that we would visit again Nixon Smiley 2 months after to see the liatris blooming. So this is Liatris gracilis, and this is the whole little prairie area of the blazing star spikes. And there was a lot of butterflies, and this is the queen butterfly that was nectaring that we got a picture of. So we went afterwards we went again to Nixon Smiley 2 months after. It was just, we couldn't get enough. And we saw different things. Instead of possibly looking down, we were looking up, and we saw this really interesting big nest in the pine tree. Looks like a hawk or an owl. It's pretty big. Cool. So we just saw that nest there while we were on Nixon Smiley. And that is my presentation. Thanks. You guys have any questions?
When's the next field trip?
Oh, yeah, so we decided that we would not have a field trip in March because of Native Plant Day. So March 25th, Native Plant Day. That's what we're gonna focus on, but in April, I think we just confirmed it, that we will go to a county preserve. I think it will possibly be R. Hardy Matheson, I think, for April. So the Snapper Creek hammock, and there's a little bit of pine rockland over there. So
I have a question for you all. Who's never been on a capture field trip before? Anybody? You of you? We gotta change that. How can we sign up?
So just keep your eyes peeled to the newsletter, because that's where the chapter events get announced, as well as on the website. So on the website calendar or the emailed newsletter. So stay tuned for April. That's the next one after Native Plant Day.
Another question.
Okay.
What was the most exciting, thing that you saw? I mean, for me, that I'm jealous about the crow that you guys found in that
Florida City.
But was that like the best one, or was there something more exciting than that?
So I would say Florida City is really special because it hadn't burned in so long that it was nice to go and see it, and it grew back really fast. So the timing when we visited was just right because it quickly grew back. And so we were there 5 months after. And so afterwards, after that, it gets really, really harder to walk, more vines. And that's the field trip that actually spurred me to do more. So I wanted to start with Florida City because after that one, I started leading more field trips. Yeah. And I lost my notebook there one day. I want to find it because we had to run out from a rainstorm. It was always raining. Yeah.
Well, the thing I find really incredible about the field trips, especially since you've been on the committee and helping lead them, and since you Joe, have been attending, is that, they've always been about enjoying plants, but now they've taken, they're still about that, but they've taken an additional step in being a tool for scientific reporting of what's in these preserves. So I'm curious, all these observations, are the preserve managers actively using this information? Have they get feedback on, monitoring and keeping tabs on it?
Totally. That's a good question. I mean, they definitely use iNaturalist. They will go on the iNaturalist website and look up their preserve and see what has been observed there. They use it to supplement their past data to see if, yeah. iNaturalist is wonderful. It's really worthwhile going on the website and just using the explore function and typing in any area to see what's there, or if you're looking for a particular plant, where you can find it.
Any more questions? Yeah, where was that golf range thing?
The Gulf Gray Twig, that was at Camp Owasso. That's where it was spotted.
Parasite, a tree or something like that?
That's true. That's one little tidbit about them, is that their root system does possibly connect and tap into other plants to steal their nutrients. Yeah, it could be some kind of parasite.
That's all.
Interesting.
So I have a question from YouTube. Is that Asian poison tree seed the first find, or is it a new invasive species? I think it was the big seed photo.
Well, it did in Germany, so it wasn't growing. It was just washed up.
Yeah, I think it's a species that does pop up sometimes. I remember it was Jim Gross that found it, and I was like, oh, let me have a picture.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and then I don't know if anybody watched the presentation I gave a couple years ago, but I think Jim asked about, like, identifying seedlings on iNaturalist, and I was like, well, actually, I have a picture of the one that you found. So it was like a pretty funny connection. So when I saw that picture, it was like, oh.
Yeah, it was an interesting find that day.
And Marty just told me that the department, yeah, I mean,
Oh, wow.
they showed the fall and I've seen it on the that's what it's coming. Yeah. That's what it's coming.
Yeah, that's just where it grows naturally, native too. Cool, interesting.
And Gwen says that you're giving her a reason to wake up early to cook.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. Yeah, we started at 9. We usually meet at 9. But there was one field trip on a native plant day that Steve led, and it was in the afternoon. We went to we had a field trip on native plant field day to a site in the afternoon. It was called Steve's Secret Garden. Yeah. Yes, you have a question? So there are examples of the Manchineel out of the wild, but there are places you can go and see it on a trail in Everglades National Park. But there is one at Fairchild Garden. Not on display, it doesn't have a sign, but there is one there as part of the collection.
Should probably have a sign.
There's more than one. Yes, in Everglades. Yeah. You can see it growing wild there, yeah, the Manchineel. Oh, yeah. It's a coastal plant. Mhm. It grows with the buttonwoods. The Manchineel.
I do.
Okay.
Drawing of coral beads of a hummingbird.
That's nice.
Thank you for a great.
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Guys for tuning in, and thank you to everyone who is tuning in on YouTube. We'll be selling raffle tickets for about 10 minutes. So put them all in time, and we'll divide them up at the end. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you. the,